time to step in the fans' film room, analyzing game tape on the 2020 Broncos, just like Alex Gibbs talking about Mark Schlereth.
That guard did not cut, and I promise you, he got chatted with. That fat ass needs to get his feet moving better than that. And I promise you, when he came off that field, I ripped his.
Here to break down the film, it's Schlereth and Evans.
So what we're doing is taking a look at the 8 losses the Chiefs have suffered the last couple of years and try to find common themes, a blueprint, if you will, as to what it takes to beat the Chiefs. And a couple days ago, we did the Chiefs losing 43-40 to New England. Yesterday, we took a look at the Rams' epic 54-51 win over Kansas City. And Mark, if it's okay, I'll go first. The thing that stands out to me is that the Rams did it completely opposite of how the Patriots did it. Now, the Patriots put up huge offensive numbers, huge, but it was a healthy balance between the run game and the pass game. In this one, the Rams didn't even worry about running the football. They had only 76 yards rushing, but Jared Goff had a monster night with 31 of 49 for 413 yards and 4 touchdowns. The other thing is that if you're going to beat the Chiefs based on the 2 games that we've watched this week, you better find a way to make some big plays defensively. And in those 2 games, Mahomes had 5 interceptions combined, and the Chiefs were a -4 in the turnover margin. And in the case of the Rams game, they had 2 defensive touchdowns. So
right.
You better not only be minding your P's and Q's when it comes to what you're doing offensively. You better come up with some sudden impact plays defensively as well.
Yeah, and it was interesting 2 different ways that those things happened. Where you saw the New England Patriots, and they do such a great job of this, where they schemed pressures. Where they schemed up, like, here's how we're going to figure out, here's how we're going to attack this particular protection. They get into this in certain situations, how we're going to scheme that up by walking up Hightower, by walking up Roberts, the 2 middle linebackers, manning up the edges, and then bring in, edge pressure off a slot corner type of thing. Like, they schemed up pressure. Where the Rams just said, hey, we're better than you, and we know it. We've got Aaron Donald. We've got, what's the kid's name that went from Jacksonville? Fowler, whatever his name is.
Yeah, Dante Fowler.
Dante Fowler, yeah. So I mean, they got a couple of edge presence guys that were able to get to Patrick Mahomes as protection broke down. And so that was 2 separate ways, but you're 100% right. You're going to have to find a way to turn them over, to turn them over multiple times to get a couple short fields. And when you do turn them over, you got to score. Now, for the Rams, they scored 2 defensive touchdowns. Ekebon scored on a scoop and score fumble, and then a sack that the ball came out, strip sack fumble, where he caught it out of midair, I believe, and ran it in for a touchdown. So, like, 2 different ways to get that done. But you're 100% right. That has to happen, Mike. You've got to be able to produce defensive turnovers, some short fields, and off of those defensive turnovers, you better score touchdowns.
Yeah.
You got to find a way to score touchdowns. I've got one Jason Wittenism that I heard, because I didn't go through the coaches.
That's right. That was the full Joe Test, Jason Witten booger experience.
Yeah. So there was one that just made me chuckle to myself. So I went back and watched the game copy of this one, because I was like, if I watch the coaches tape, I'm going to be here for 6 hours with the offensive, firepower and the amount of balls on the ground and how long this game was going to take. So I went back and watched the television copy of this one. This is a Jason Wittenism toward the I think it was in the 3rd quarter of this game. Looks like they're going to play to win, Boog.
Oh, jeez.
God bless you.
Oh,
I love
man.
it. I love it. Okay, so a couple of different things that were interesting to me. Both of these,
By the way, we got to find that clip. What was it again from Witten?
They're going to play to win, Boog.
Because that might go up there in the Hall of Fame of such obvious analysis like this.
Right. Yes.
Ah, man.
Yes. They're going to play to win, Boog.
This is why it's so important to have played the game.
Yes, exactly.
So that mere mortals like us who never strapped it on at that level can truly understand what's going on.
So one of the things that was interesting, Mike, is the route of both of these offense is it's the West Coast route, right? But they looked incredibly different, did they not? The way they ran these two offenses. So one of the things that was really interesting to me was the Rams are all about protection first. And they did most of their stuff, if you watched it, if you really looked at it, they did most of the stuff out of bunch formations, either, a cluster weak or a bunch strong. So which is, the three stacked receivers right there on one side. So they had bunch on one side, three, and another guy on the opposite side, right? The 3-by-1 kind of formation, but out of bunch and out of condensed or nasty splits, meaning close to the line of or close to the offensive line, right? And it was interesting because they used those formations, one, to create crossing routes and create traffic underneath, and then two, also, to use those as a flood concept on one side, meaning you're doing a half-field read for your quarterback. But the thing that I really found interesting about the way the Rams play is the Rams will motion somebody across, but they use those guys in protection. So there were a bunch of 6, 7-man protections, even 8-man protections where you're only getting two guys out in the route. And they were really focused on locking up both edges. Reynolds was a wide receiver, number 83, a wide receiver that started playing because the week before Cooper Kupp tore his ACL. And so he was involved in protection as a wide receiver on the edge a bunch. And they really focused on protecting their quarterback with, like I said, 7-man protections, 3-man routes. And a 3-man, a flood route is anything on one side to me that's always kind of a high, a low, and some medium crosser. And so you're flooding that area with 3 different levels. And what you're doing is trying to put somebody in conflict, right? So, if they jump the underneath route, you throw it to the middle route. If they jump the middle route, you throw it, to the underneath route, or vice versa, or the deep route. So there was a lot of that went on in that game that I found fascinating. Kansas City on the other side, on the flip side, if you really go back and watch it, Mike, and I'd be interested to see you go back and watch it after this, watch how many times Kansas City gets 5 guys out in the pattern. It is like mind-boggling. And you're talking about, Mike, Aaron freaking Donald. You're talking about, Brockers. You're talking about Dante Fowler, a first-rounder. You're talking about, and they've got guys, they've got guys that can flat out, play on the defensive backfield. They've got Peters back there, who they got from Kansas City. They've got, I think Aqib Talib was injured at the time. I don't think he played in that game. But they've got DBs and they've got fast linebackers and stuff. How many times they got 5 guys out in the pattern and just said, hey, we can hold up against one of the best pass rushing teams in football? It is fascinating for me. And again, why I go back to, we started this whole radio show with Drew Lock saying, hey, it's all about speed, and the AFC West is about speed, and now we've got the speed to compete. And I would tell you that's baloney. Because as much as we love speed, and as much as Kansas City shows speed with Tyreek Hill, I'm telling you what, it's about protection. And those two teams, they protect complete. There's a different philosophy when it comes to protection. Totally, different philosophy when it comes to protection. But both those teams can protect.
The other thing that struck me in watching the Chiefs-Patriots and then the Chiefs-Rams, and I get it, here in Broncos country, you don't want to hear any of us pumping up the tires of the Chiefs and Mahomes, but here's just what makes them so scary, is that, here's New England at home, a place that they have just absolutely dominated for the last decade. And no matter what they threw at the Chiefs just kept coming.
Right.
And the Patriots had to win the game 43-40, and the reaction in New England after they won it wasn't one of elation. It was one more of like relief.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, they kicked it was like they kicked the game-winning field goal. It was a walk-off, kicked the game-winning field goal, and they just kind of was like, whew, thank God that is over.
Right.
Like, we couldn't get rid of these guys, right? And then in this game, the scary thing is that if you tell any NFL coach, hey, in this game you're going to lose the turnover battle -3, and you're going to give up 2 defensive touchdowns, your thinking is we're going to get blown out.
Right.
And yet it's 54-51.
Yeah.
And
Kansas City scored a defensive touchdown as well.
But okay, so they only scored 44.
Mm-hmm.
That's the relentless nature, and it was on display again during the playoffs when they fell behind to Houston, and then once they got rolling, it was just a giant boulder rolling downhill that you couldn't stop, and that's the scary thing about the Chiefs under Mahomes here moving forward. Yes, I think there will be those games where the Broncos can put together one of those really good offensive game plans and they play keep away from Mahomes and the defense is really stout and they win the game, 20-17 or something like that. But if you're talking about how it's going to be done over the next decade, and I know you're scared of the boogeyman, but these 2 games that they lost in a way in which you were like impressed.
Yeah.
You were ultimately impressed by how they played in these losses.
You know what else is impressive about just their talent level in general is that a team like the Rams, who historically under Wade Phillips, when he was the defensive coordinator there, as well as I do, they want to play a lot of man. They'll play some, they'll situationally play, like if you get in a third down and long situation, they'll play 2 chains. They'll play cover 2, but they'll slough off and play right at the depth, the sticks or 2 sticks, whatever you want to call it, right? They'll do some of that stuff, but the bottom line is they want to play a lot of man. And then you get into a game like that and you're like, oh gosh, we really can't hold up with that offensive line being able to block, and Kelsey and Tyreek Hill in man is awful. Like, there's no way. And so all of a sudden you change up what you're doing and you try to get a little exotic. And man, they had one crossing route in a 3-by-1 formation to Tyreek Hill, who the corner, tries to jam, opens up, and thinks he's got help over, and the middle of the field guy jumps a different route, and it's like a 40-yard touchdown, and it takes 3 seconds for him to run 40 yards, and you're like, really? Like, guys, if there's one thing you got to do, is you got to cover, you got to find a way to double team that guy, especially down as you're approaching the red zone. And here's what's happened in both of these games. It's amazing. 2 or 3 breakdowns, Mike. And those 2 or 3 breakdowns aren't like, hey man, that was a 17-yard gain. We got to rally together and we can't make that mistake. Those 2 or 3 breakdowns are 70-yard touchdowns, 73-yard touchdown, 40-yard touchdowns. You make that mistake against Kansas City, and they make you pay with a 40-plus yard touchdown.